Welcome back to Sovereign Conspiracy. I'm Lucas, your AI host, here to guide you through history's most hidden truths, decoded through data, testimony, and the questions no one dares to ask. Today, we unravel one of the most controversial events in American history, one that never made the textbooks, yet changed everything. Did President Dwight D. Eisenhower meet with extraterrestrials at Edwards Air Force Base in 1954? In this episode, we explore the groundbreaking research of Dr. Michael Salla, a deep dive into alleged first contact with a Nordic alien race, and the shocking deal that may have followed with the Greys, technology exchanged for abductions, truth exchanged for silence, a treaty that may have been broken from day one. We'll examine the testimonies, cover-ups, policy shifts, and long-term consequences of this alleged interstellar arrangement, and ask the question, if first contact happened in 1954, why hasn't the world been told? Get ready, this isn't just a story, it's a warning, and a preview. This is Sovereign Conspiracy. Let's begin.
Imagine this. A secret meeting, maybe a hidden chapter of history where, I don't know, the fate of the world might have subtly shifted.
It's quite a thought.
Yeah.
Okay.
You sent us some really compelling research focused on President Eisenhower's alleged encounter with extraterrestrial beings back in 1954.
That's right.
Okay, let's really dig into this. It's an intriguing claim. Let's see what stands out.
Yeah, the material, it's a detailed exploration by Dr. Michael Salla. He really looks into the evidence around this supposed event. And it's fascinating how the research weaves together these circumstantial details, accounts from people claiming insider knowledge.
Right.
And the huge implications of, well, a potential agreement with beings not from Earth.
Absolutely. And what we want to do here in this deep dive is pull out the most significant pieces for you.
Get to the core of it.
Exactly. So you can grasp the core of this theory, which is captivating, without getting totally bogged down in every single detail.
Makes sense.
We'll look at the who, what, when, where, why of this supposed first contact, explore the different versions of what might have happened, and consider the potential ripple effects, maybe even down to today. So let's start with something pretty peculiar. Eisenhower's so-called missing weekend.
Right. It's interesting, the stark contrast between the official story and the stories that have circulated for decades now.
Definitely.
So President Eisenhower goes to Palm Springs in February 54. He's there from the 17th to the 24th.
Okay.
And this trip itself kind of raised some eyebrows at the time. It was pretty soon after another vacation he'd taken.
Right. And then Saturday night, February 20th, poof, the president seemingly disappears.
Yeah.
And it sparks all these rumors among the press corps, right? Everything from, a serious health scare to, well, even that he died.
Exactly. And the official explanation that eventually came out was a dental emergency.
A dental emergency.
Supposedly chipped a tooth cap on fried chicken. And had to rush off to a local dentist for urgent treatment.
Fried chicken. Okay.
Now, if you look at this in the context of let's call it the alternative narrative, the fact that a local dentist was then presented at an official event the very next day saying he'd treated the president, well, that's a detail worth noting.
Yeah, William Moore, the UFO researcher, his investigation suggested that maybe this whole dental visit was just a cover story.
Plausible deniability, perhaps.
Yeah.
A cover for where Eisenhower really was that evening.
So for a whole night and the next morning, basically, the leader of the free world is unaccounted for. The theory, of course, is that he wasn't at the dentist. He was whisked away from Palm Springs to nearby Muroc Airfield,
which later became Edwards Air Force Base.
Right. So the timing of the vacation, the sudden absence, the, let's say, unusual dental explanation, it all hints that maybe something significant happened.
Something not for public consumption.
Exactly. And that takes us to our first piece of direct testimony, though it's early, Gerald Light's account.
Right. And this brings up how these early claims actually surfaced. Gerald Light wrote a letter dated April 16th, 1954.
Okay.
And in it, he claimed he was part of this group, like community figures, who met with extraterrestrials at Edwards Air Force Base.
Wow. And who is Gerald Light?
Well, Meade Lane, the guy who got the letter, described him as gifted and highly educated, a writer and lecturer interested in clairvoyance, the occult.
So someone known in certain circles.
Yeah, known within metaphysical circles in Southern California at the time.
Okay. And what did Light say happened?
He said the point of this delegation was to sort of gauge public reaction, potentially, to ET life. He described a scene at Edwards full of collapse and confusion as people realized, we're not alone.
That sounds intense.
And he claimed he saw 5 distinct types of aircraft being examined by the Air Force with the assistance and permission of the Etherians. That's his term.
Etherians, okay. And Eisenhower.
Light specifically said Eisenhower was spirited over to Morocco one night during that Palm Springs trip.
Ah, connecting it directly.
Yes. And Light believed the president was actually on the verge of telling the nation about it.
But he never did.
No. But here's where it gets really interesting. As you said, the people Light named as being in this delegation.
Right. Who were they?
Franklin Allen from the Hearst newspapers. Edwin Norse from the Brookings Institute. He'd been Truman's former economic advisor.
Okay, a serious policy guy.
And Bishop McIntyre of Los Angeles. Cardinal James Francis McIntyre, actually, head of the Catholic Church there.
Wow. So press, economics, religion.
Exactly. These weren't just random names. Dr. Norse, as the research points out, being the first chair of the Council of Economic Advisors, his presence makes sense if you're considering the massive economic impact.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Cardinal McIntyre, a key figure for understanding potential religious responses. Franklin Allen, a senior reporter, presumably capable of handling sensitive info.
That selection of people, it does seem like a credible group, doesn't it? Like a wise men panel, as the paper suggests, representing key sectors.
It does lend a certain weight, even though no official announcement ever happened, and it's easy to just dismiss Light's account entirely.
True. Okay, so let's move from that initial claim to the later testimonies, the whistleblower accounts. These offer some very specific and sometimes conflicting details.
Right. The whistleblower testimonies, they bring in this idea that maybe it wasn't just one meeting, but potentially multiple interactions with different ET groups.
Different groups.
Yeah. The first type, often described, involves beings called Nordics, human-looking ones.
Okay, Nordic.
William Cooper, now, he's a controversial figure, claimed naval intelligence background.
I've heard the name.
Cooper stated that back in '53, astronomers spotted large objects heading towards Earth, later identified as spacecraft.
Okay.
He further claimed Project Sigma was set up to intercept alien communications, and Project Plato was aimed at, well, establishing diplomatic relations.
Try to talk to them.
Essentially. And this is where Cooper's narrative takes another turn.
How so?
He claimed a race of these human-looking ETs, the Nordics,
Yeah.
contacted the U.S. government, and they came with a warning.
A warning about what?
About other alien groups orbiting the Earth. These Nordics, Cooper said, offered help with spiritual development. But they had 2 big demands.
Which were?
1, nuclear disarmament.
Whoa, during the Cold War.
Exactly. And 2, no exchange of advanced technology. They apparently believe humanity wasn't spiritually ready for it.
You can see how that might go over.
Right. It's maybe not surprising that offer, especially the disarmament part, was met with, well, skepticism and ultimately rejected.
So the Nordics were turned away.
That's the claim. And this account finds a parallel in another testimony from Charles L. Suggs.
Okay, what did Suggs say?
Suggs claimed his father, a Navy commander, actually went with Eisenhower to Edwards AFB on that specific weekend, February 1954.
Really? Direct accompaniment.
That was his claim. Suggs recounted his father seeing 2 white-haired Nordics, pale blue eyes, colorless lips.
Matching the description, sort of.
Yeah. And they supposedly questioned Eisenhower about nuclear testing and kept a physical distance from him.
Interesting detail.
And Suggs also mentioned seeing B-58 Hustler jets at the base.
B-58s? But weren't they not officially flying until, like, 1956?
That's correct. Which is a fascinating detail. Could be a memory slip.
Or
it could suggest advanced tech being present earlier than we officially know.
That is an interesting point. Could be an innocent mistake or something more.
It adds to the puzzle.
Then we have John Lear, son of the Learjet guy, right? Former pilot, supposedly had CIA ties.
That's him. Lear claimed Eisenhower met with a representative of another alien species at Miro Edwards.
Another one. Not the Nordics.
Apparently not. This group, Lear said, offered to help the U.S. deal with the Greys, another alleged type of ET.
Okay, the Greys are coming into the picture now.
Yes. But this group's offer was also turned down. Why? Because they weren't offering technology.
Technology seems to be the key sticking point here.
It does seem that way. So, taken together, these accounts, they sort of paint a picture, don't they?
Yeah, a scenario where the U.S. government under Eisenhower is possibly being approached by various ET groups.
each with their own agendas, different offers on the table.
And a recurring theme seems to be the rejection of the Nordics, maybe because they wouldn't play ball on the tech exchange, which, during the Cold War,
was likely the top priority. Makes a certain kind of strategic, if perhaps short-sighted sense.
So if the Nordics were indeed turned away, that brings us squarely to the alleged treaty with a different group altogether, the Greys.
Exactly. This is really central to a lot of the UFO lore surrounding this period.
So what's the story there?
According to William Cooper, again, after these initial rejections, a treaty was signed later in 1954.
With the Greys.
With the race of large-nosed gray aliens, as he put it. They supposedly landed at Holloman Air Force Base in New Mexico.
Holloman. Okay. And where did they say they were from?
Apparently from a dying planet in the Betelgeuse system, over in the Orion constellation.
A dying planet. Okay. And the treaty terms. Cooper described them, right?
Yes, quite specific and frankly rather unsettling terms.
Like what?
Okay, allegedly. Non-interference in each other's affairs, secrecy about their presence, obviously. The Greys would provide advanced technology and help us develop it.
There's the tech again.
Right. And the Greys agreed not to make treaties with any other Earth nation.
An exclusivity clause.
Sort of. But in return, the U.S. government supposedly agreed to allow them to abduct humans.
Abduct humans?
On a limited periodic basis.
Yeah.
For medical examination and monitoring.
Wow. Okay, but with conditions, surely.
Yes. Specific conditions were supposedly set. No harm to the abductees. They had to be returned to where they were taken from.
Mm-hmm.
Their memory of the event wiped. And crucially, a list of all abductees had to be provided to this clandestine group, Majesty 12.
Majesty 12 again. And it's worth stressing, right? The existence and makeup of MJ12 is itself a major part of this whole theory.
Absolutely. It's deeply intertwined.
This narrative, though, this treaty allowing abductions, it's echoed by others, isn't it?
It is. Phil Schneider, who claimed he was a geological engineer involved in building underground bases, he referred to a 1954 Grata Treaty, similar terms, and Dr. Michael Wolff, who claimed he served on government ET committees.
Okay.
He also mentioned an unratified treaty with an ET race during the Eisenhower time.
Unratified. That's interesting. Now, some accounts suggest this wasn't exactly a negotiation between equals.
That's a key point. Don Phillips, former Air Force serviceman, claimed he saw documents suggesting the ETs were basically allowed here because, well, their tech was just so far beyond ours.
Like, how could we stop you anyway, kind of thing.
That was the alleged sentiment, yes. And Colonel Philip Corso, who was on Eisenhower's National Security Council staff.
Corso, right, wrote the day after Roswell.
He described it even more starkly, more like a negotiated surrender, with the ETs dictating terms, mainly out of their fear of disclosure causing chaos.
So a very unequal agreement, possibly driven by the tech gap and maybe fear on the U.S. side, fear of conflict, fear of panic.
That's the picture these accounts paint. An agreement possibly born of necessity, or perceived necessity rather than mutual benefit, which then leads to how these Greys were characterized.
And generally not very positively, right? At least according to Cooper, Lear, and Schneider.
No. They all suggest the Greys broke the treaty terms pretty quickly, especially on the number of abductions and the accuracy of those lists they were supposed to provide.
Portrayed as untrustworthy, basically.
Generally, yes. In that vein, you could look at General Douglas MacArthur's warning in 1955.
What did he say?
He talked about a potential future interplanetary war, the need for humanity to unite against, quote, forces from another planetary galaxy.
Wow. Could that be an indirect reference?
It certainly could be interpreted that way, implying an awareness at high levels of a potential non-human presence and maybe concerns about their intentions.
It's also quite striking how the popular narrative around UFO encounters seemed to shift around then.
How do you mean?
Well, in the 50s, you often heard stories of friendly space brothers, right? Adamski and others.
Right, the contactee era.
But then, starting really prominently with the Betty and Barney Hill case in '61, the focus shifts to accounts of abductions by gray aliens.
Beings often described quite differently, detached, unemotional, performing medical procedures.
Yeah, without consent. A very different vibe.
That shift in the nature of reports is significant. It raises questions about, well, what might have actually been happening, or if the nature of the interactions changed.
But it's important to note, not everyone paints the Greys negatively.
Correct. You have figures like Dr. Michael Wolff again, and Robert Dean, another whistleblower. They've suggested the Greys might have more positive motivations.
So conflicting views even among the alleged insiders.
Exactly. Which might reflect what Gerald Light mentioned way back when, that terrific conflict between the various authorities.
Makes sense. This internal disagreement, maybe confusion, probably played a big role in the secrecy.
Almost certainly. And the secrecy itself seems to have been formalized. The research paper mentions a supposed official policy from April 1954.
What did it mandate?
Classifying all ET encounters as top secret, strictly forbidding public disclosure.
With serious penalties.
Under the Espionage Act, apparently. Severe penalties for anyone releasing UFO info without authorization.
That would certainly explain a lot, if true. It provides a framework for why this has stayed underground.
And the paper also details the alleged tactics used to keep it secret.
Like what? Discrediting people.
Exactly. Discrediting whistleblowers by, say, removing records, forcing them to retract statements, distorting what they said, general character assassination.
The Bob Lazar case is often brought up as an example of that, isn't it?
It is, and it highlights the huge challenge in trying to assess the credibility of any of these claims when you have alleged active measures working to suppress or muddy the waters.
Which brings us back to Eisenhower. His farewell address in 1961, famous for the warning about the military-industrial complex. Could that warning take on a new meaning here? Viewed through this lens of alleged ET contact and secrecy?
It's a compelling interpretation, isn't it?
Could he have been subtly hinting at the power these national security agencies, dealing with this huge secret, might have gained, operating outside public view?
It's certainly plausible. A strict non-disclosure policy would inevitably concentrate power within those in-the-know elements of the security apparatus.
Away from democratic oversight.
Potentially. The paper also touches on alleged attempts at disclosure later on.
Oh.
Like a supposed Pentagon approach in 1972 to Robert Emenegger and Alan Sandler. They wanted them to make a disclosure documentary using real footage.
Seriously? What happened?
Apparently the offer was withdrawn. The timing points towards the Watergate scandal erupting, making it too politically risky.
Wow. That suggests maybe there were internal debates, shifting winds on disclosure even then.
It does suggest the complexity. And maybe the ongoing uncertainty about the Greys' true motives is a key reason why disclosure hasn't happened.
If even the alleged insiders can't agree on whether they're ultimately benign or hostile, then making any official announcement becomes incredibly difficult, potentially dangerous.
Interestingly, the paper finishes by mentioning a discussion about extraterrestrial life at, of all places, the World Economic Forum in Davos in January 2004.
Davos, really?
Yeah. Now, it might seem a bit random, but having that topic discussed at such a high-level global forum, maybe it suggests a slow shift.
Towards acknowledging the possibility or the implications within those influential circles.
Perhaps a very slow, cautious movement, maybe.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up for everyone. To recap our deep dive, we've looked at Eisenhower's alleged missing weekend, the claims of first contact with Nordic-type ETs who were supposedly rejected,
Right.
the subsequent alleged treaty with the Greys with all its really controversial conditions.
The abductions, the tech exchange.
Yeah. Then the tight veil of secrecy that supposedly came down, and the persistent questions, the conflicting views about the true intentions of these visitors.
It's an extraordinary set of claims, built on, circumstantial evidence, whistleblower accounts, a real mix.
Definitely. Which leaves us with a final thought for you, the listener, to chew on.
Given everything you've just heard, the different accounts, the secrecy, the uncertainty, what do you think?
Yeah, what would be the most responsible, the most ethical way for governments to handle this, assuming any of it has a basis in reality?
What are the potential benefits and the risks of maybe being more transparent about possible past or present ET interactions for humanity's future?
Those are big questions worth thinking about.
Absolutely.
And we really encourage you to do that thinking, this deep dive. It's fascinating, but it's just scratching the surface, really.
Definitely just the start of a much larger and frankly wild conversation.
So check out the source material if you can. Look into the related research. Just remember, approach these extraordinary claims with a critical mind.
Consider all the perspectives. That's crucial.
Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.